Hello again.
Hello. We're back.
We're back.
In black.
Someone got the psychic memo.
I know. Oh, my shoulder
It's so
pads
good. I
kept
love these new
falling.
shoulder pad thingies. They're
I
so
felt
like Star
great.
Trek, but they're good. They make you
Right?
look like, I don't know, it's great.
Something. Thank you.
Yeah. We don't have a title for this yet, so forgive the lengthy introduction, but there's a lot that's up in and around worth and knowing you're valuable and not giving yourself up because people judge you. And so we thought we'd just dive in and you guys can go along for the ride with us and we can see where we go. I know that I just did a live, like right before we recorded this, based on a comment that someone put on my YouTube video. And for me, this is kind of I'm like re-entering the world.
Rebirthed.
After like a year and a half of really cocooning while still creating, which was pretty awkward for me and I think probably awkward for everybody. But because anytime someone's doing that, you can pick up on the energy, but you don't necessarily know what you're picking up on.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so here's me like putting myself out there again, energetically, re-engaging. And someone's like, she's become so arrogant, all about the money. She doesn't even answer a question when you ask her. And I was like, huh. So I addressed it. I did a live about it and you guys can go check that out. But yeah, I mean, this is really up right now.
So what did you say that was so triggering and so wrong? I'm offended.
I was talking about
Crystal.
being the valuable product in your own life.
Well, it's like people don't want to choose that. I mean, and I've gotten this for a while and at different levels. When I do the victim narrative content, it really does a thing. Whether it's just like, well, this is why you are the way you are, or it's because it happened to you. And when I do more of the empowering, you could choose, yada, yada, it's like crickets. And so I'm like, what is that? Where folks just, I get there's a piece of wanting to be seen, be heard, and like, yes, life, it's a lot sometimes. And I always have choice in my perspective. So what am I going to choose that's going to create the life I desire?
Well, it is just kind of confronting that you are the source of everything in your life. I mean, it's confronting for me too. I mean, I'm constantly navigating phases in my own life where I discover that I would way rather be right and be in my feelings than take responsibility for making a different choice because the different choice is uncomfortable and I have standards and I'd rather have those standards. And I'm constantly faced with my own delicious need to be right,
Yeah.
So I don't always love it, but the thing that I personally recognize, and I guess maybe this is just what makes me different, like maybe this is what makes us different, maybe the people that are willing to look at this are just different, is that when I do finally become willing to look at that I'm the source and I can choose something different, everything gets easier from there. And to me, that's kind of the only thing that kind of keeps me coming back to that particular possibility of letting go of the feelings for a moment just so I can give myself another choice, for example.
Yeah.
So
well,
it's a different way of living.
Yeah, 100%. And this is where people get stuck, I get, when it's like, if we're only going to say it's about XYZ. Like I've been talking about conditional worth on my Instagram and on my TikTok and did what's it called, a podcast about it too. I was like, okay, this is like, there's a lot to say about this. So when I did the mini version on TikTok, someone commented, well, yeah, obviously capitalism. This is why, we have conditional worth and blah, 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 because we need to make money to survive. So our survival is connected to our worth. And I was like, that's interesting because in my perspective, I don't think about it that way. I don't go into, well, it's because of the system. And certainly, right, I'm acknowledging that there is a system in place and it's not the best and it does all these things. And I told the person, well, I acknowledge that. And where my attention is, what can I choose? What can I create here? What do I have control over? Because I don't have the big control over the whole capitalistic everything, how we function. I have control on my perspective and where I'm going. And so if I can spend the energy on that with detaching my worth, then I get that I'm free no matter what the system is doing.
What do you think is people's fascination with why? This is why.
Oh my gosh, that's all of psychology. That's all of psychology. And then even within neurolinguistic programming, they taught us like statistically, like the majority of people want to know why first, like why you're offering something, why you're saying something, what, not how, but like why, which I just thought was so interesting. But to me, it's like I get to take a break from the responsibility of choosing. Just tell me why. Tell me why I am this way, the way I am. And now I can take a breath. So I get there's a little detachment, but if people are going into a lot of shame, blame, and judgment of themselves, then it's almost like the break from having to take responsibility is like a nervous system breath, because they're no longer having to judge themselves for what they're not choosing. I mean, because that's what it is for me. Ultimately, is the nervous system is just, if I'm just always, not always, but a frequent defense of I'm not wrong, and that jacks up my nervous system.
Yeah, I was looking at there's most of my process has to do with abandoning the why in favor of the what's occurring.
Yeah.
And so I'm constantly catching myself in it, mostly just because, well, one, I learned about it in Access Consciousness, and I was like, okay, so why always takes you in this toilet bowl situation? If you start looking for why things are, you're in the story, and the story never sets you free. So I got the information, but then I started applying the information to my life, and I started to notice, like when I was trying to change money, for example, I had a whole story about why I was the way that I was with money, and I could tell you all about it, like my mom, and I grew up in a trailer park, and there was a whole story. And then I solidified that story through my 20s. So by the time I was 36, it was like, well, I can't because. And the thing was that I can't because wasn't changing money for me. It was keeping money the same. So enter an Access Consciousness tool called the How to Become Money Workbook. And I do that like every single week, religiously, for like 8 weeks. And what I started to discover is that allowing that story around why it was this way gave me access to the choices that I had beyond it. But holding the story in place kept me locked into continuing to create the story as real via my money reality. So money was kind of it was one of the first major areas where I got to see this in action, and I got to see the effects of letting go of the story. So, obviously, like, you learn in whatever direction that you learn this in. So, but now I apply that to my life as soon as I become willing.
Well, yeah, there's that. There's
these times where I just kind of, and most of the time it's like in the relationship where I want to be right about something, I want to be right about this particular thing. And so I have a whole story of like why it shouldn't occur and it should be this way. And I'm trying to force my way into existence. And this is why. And so sometimes those are harder for me to let go of because they are, because I put a lot of energy into being right about that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I haven't, but again, I'm always having difficulty around those things I'm holding in place with a why. Here's why this is the way it is. This is a hill I'm going to die on. The relationship can die in favor of this point of view. And then afterwards, I'm like, is that really,
do I want to keep,
is that really what I want to do? So I see a lot of people like choosing a hill and dying on it. And I just wonder about that.
Yeah, and needing to, like, what is the need to prove, right? I mean, if we are functioning from judgment, then there really is a desire to prove. And I know that's come up for me this year in being in my second year of business and going into it. I had these projections and expectations like, oh, I'm going to like double and triple what I did last year. And I was like, well, that didn't happen. And so, and so I'm kind of, as the year is coming to a close, I'm just looking at, why? Like, the universe is protecting me from something or what else, it's like a trauma response in the sense of like, I only need to seek the why if I'm making it wrong. Otherwise, the why is irrelevant. Right?
Making it wrong or right, I would say.
Yeah.
Like, because I can't be, yeah, it's the same spectrum actually. Like, if you have to make it right, you already believe you're wrong. Actually, that's the whole thing that I'm addressing this month with, I'm doing a 30 by 30, which in Access Consciousness is you take one clearing and you say it out loud 30 times a day for 30 days and you just see what it changes. But this particular clearing is addressing that energy of like becoming the most valuable product in your life, because when you have to constantly prove that you're right, you know as a fact that you're wrong. And this is how I found this, was like recognizing that I was needing to be right so much about so many things and feeling so wrong simultaneously and not knowing how to change that.
Yeah, well, and I mean, it's happened to us, I get so dynamically of showing up on social media, and it's so easy to retreat when, things in personal life or when people online are having really strong judgments and points of view about
And
what you're creating.
Yeah. And I mean, I've actually, I want to start a whole channel of reacting to the comments on your stuff because you get so many. Because I was like, wow. I mean, and so the more visible you get, the more exposure you have. You have exposure to the good, the bad, and the ugly. So you have more exposure to people grateful for you, more exposure to shitty people, more exposure to ugly people. So it's equal, kind of like, and what are you gonna, if that's the thing about conditional words, it's like if you've based your worth on whether or not you get positive validation or negative validation, and you start getting more successful and you start receiving more of all of it, but what really stands out to you is the negative, then you'll typically use that to stop yourself, like to not create, which is like, God, if all of us did that, if all the creators out there like stopped themselves and somebody judged them, we'd have no beauty in the world. And my gosh.
I heard this first, like, one time that actually really stood out was from Gary Vee, is when he said, I don't put value in the comments, like no value in especially the positive comments, because he said then the negative ones have weight to affect how I create, or something to that effect. And he has the point of view of, I feel sorry for the people that have the negative comments, but a lot of compassion, I guess I would say, of where they're coming from. Like, they are really struggling, and it's not about him as a creator, because he's just being him and swearing and being different and at these high level business things, swearing and being casual. And right. I mean, what's the gift in that of people just being themselves, yet we've decided it's wrong and need to throw daggers at everyone for just showing up?
Well, I guess it's just acknowledging that that is the world we live in. That's occurring. That will continue to occur. And what are we going to be with it? And, the thing I'm aware of more than anything is like, I am the source of the world that I want to see. You are the source of the world. You and I are creating this different possibility, and all of us are a different possibility walking, and so it's like, what would it take to live beyond the need for validation, really, and that's a really great tip from Gary Vee. I'm going to start really just, everything's just an interesting point of view. That's how we talk about it in Access Consciousness, right? And it's so easy to not do, this is just an interesting point of view, to go, oh no, this is true. If somebody said something negative, it must be true. If they took the time, and this is the thing that just baffles me because I would never do it. If they took the time to actually write down something that other people could see that's negative about that creator, it's like, well, then it must be true.
Totally. On the internet, it must be true.
It must be true.
Everything's true.
So, yeah. So how are you, like, how are you being with all of this? Because this is not a new conversation.
No. Well, it's funny because initially when this person wrote like, well, it's capitalism, and I was ready to hit the block button, and just like, get out of here, get out of my world, and then they kind of elaborated a little bit more. So I was like, okay, there's some openness there. I'll respond to, I acknowledge this, and this is what I choose in perspective. So it's just, I'm constantly seeking, what would my future self or next iteration of me choose? Would they even have the time to look at all these comments, right? And respond to all of them? No, right? Because the more exposure we have and whatnot, the more we're creating, that's just not even realistic, or not something that would necessarily even create greater, because sometimes people just want to say things to say things. They're not actually willing to hear or choose something else.
Yeah.
So then it's like, well, what can I create from this now? You know?
Yeah. And as you were saying that, my mind flipped over into, I follow Dwayne Johnson, The Rock,
Oh yeah.
just love him. I love his posts. I love the energy that he is. I just love what he is in the world. And one of his it was on Facebook, and on one of his posts I actually commented, and I don't usually take the time, I'll love it, whatever, but I commented like, yeah, fuck yeah, like just yes. And I got so much, so many other people commented on my thing, and then I got a bunch of private messages, and I was like, so basically most of the people that follow Dwayne Johnson on Facebook are like catfishers, spammers, like, and I was like, that's really interesting. I bet you he doesn't look at that at all. I bet you he's not doing any of his posting. Like he's just, I mean, who knows? But
Yeah.
like he wasn't in there like responding to everyone, because there was nothing to it. It was like,
Yeah.
I'm out there, I'm creating, love you guys, like we're going forward. And then all this random shit just happening on his post that had nothing to do with anything. And I was like, here I am giving weight to every single comment, every single thing, instead of just like thundering forward in the way that works for me. And what would it take?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's like social media is just this whole other beast versus if someone was in one of your containers or in a group or having one-on-one with you, right? That'd be kind of different versus some people just want to say things to say things. I watch the Kardashians, and currently it seems like some of the sisters are just contracted from the amount of hate they get and judgment. And I mean, people just, the energy is so strong where you can just, and they talk about it, and the stress is palpable, where it's just like, sometimes they just want to crumble, and not go out and be visible, yet they're the most visible. And I mean, it's an example I use for my clients a lot where, yes, you're seeking visibility, and are you ready? Do you have the capacity to hold that, to allow that through without it wavering you? Because I know I've retreated many a times. It's just like a constant dance.
Yeah, in and out. I watched a documentary on Jennifer Lopez, and she talked about that, like at some point, the amount of hatred for her and the way was so much that she's like, I had to pull away for a while and really look at like who I am and be that no matter what anybody said. And that just gave me so much strength and so much courage. And I just, what would it take for those of us that are willing to continue to stand up and be that and not let anybody stop us? And I think that might be a little easier when it comes to stuff online, or feel easier. And then when it comes to people in our lives, maybe that's less easy. Like, how do you navigate closer stuff?
Well, I was going to say that online has actually been my training ground, because I thought, oh yeah, I'm like over this people pleasing thing. And then I get online, I'm like, oh, I'm not. And
no, it's still my thing.
So apparently I really like it still. So, okay. So it's been a gift in that sense, that it's just been such a skill building experience that I have noticed now and even my closer interactions where I'm like, oh, I really don't need to prove myself right here, where normally I would have gone into some defense. And there was like a really pivotal text interaction recently where I was just like, I really don't need to prove this right now. That's really freeing. Like, and and I was like, oh, I get what Gary meant by like, do you want to be right or do you want to be free? Because I was like, literally had that in that moment. I was like, I don't need to be right now. But wow, I'm like, what would it take to be there much more often, especially online, to just really expose me and be us? Because that is the gift, as you say, it's just us being us, not mutilating ourselves to be what we think others desire.
No, gosh. I had a whole conversation yesterday on my salon membership call about right and freedom, and how recently I've realized that, and Gary Douglas says this a lot to all of us. It's a common question he asks us, because most, probably all problems that we get ourselves into have to do with needing to be right.
Yeah.
And so he'll often ask one of us in a conversation, well, do you want to be right or free? And for the most part, we're all like, we want to be free, you know? But what's
Maybe.
really true
Yeah.
so we want to be right. We are right.
Yeah.
It's like not even like I want to be right. I am. How do I let go of something that's just true?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so many times for me personally, like letting go of that rightness feels like letting go of a whole identity, like letting go of I don't even know, like a standard that just is. Like, how can I possibly not be the mouthpiece for this way things should be in the world? I mean, it goes that deep in my body. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, it really, it does. I noticed it when I was actually serving, especially I was like, at one point I was working around a pool at the Ritz-Carlton as a server, and, there are all these rules there about like, you can't have pets, or you can't blah, 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 you can't bring drinks in, and yada, yada. And people used to call me the enforcer because I was the one that was busting people's balls saying, no, get out. Like, I'm not tolerant. Because I'm like, if I follow the rules, you have to follow the rules,
That's right.
And that.
My mom used to call me the time Nazi.
Oh,
I'm like,
there you go.
Look, if we're going to pick, and so this is so funny because I'm almost always late to yours and my time to record this. This is hilarious. And I was like, for some reason with this thing, I'm just really relaxed.
I know.
I was like, I need to look at this. But yeah, she was like, okay, time Nazi. And so I was like, no, like there, and that's really the way we were raised. It's like, even if you talk to her now, which I can't talk to her because she's, anyway. Even if you talk to her now, she's like, there are just things, there's just facts. There's no relative truth. There's absolute truth,
Right.
And I mean, growing up religious, we didn't grow up Christian, but we grew up religious, and then we switched to Christian. So it was just a different version of absolute truth. But we were raised with like, violence is not an option. You don't call people this, you do this, and you don't do this. Men don't do this, and women don't, like really, really strong facts.
Yeah.
And I guess probably what sticks to me about them the most is like, they seem good. Mm-hmm. Like, this seems like a good thing to uphold. There's one particular relationship one that I saw exposed on Love is Blind. That show. It's such a great show.
Yeah.
It's terrible, but like, it's like a train wreck and you can't look away. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that caused a lot of problems was like, you cannot look at other people that way or be around other people when you're with me. Like, you've committed to me, you've made this commitment, you're saying you're going to be my wife, and that means. And man, I watched the trauma around that, and I recognized a point of view that I had been bearing the standard of, especially since we got to this country. And this country is this is a different set of realities here. It's different. Yeah. It's different. And so when I got here, my standard no longer applied, but I was using it to try to get a grasp on some feeling of worth. I just didn't know that's what was happening. I didn't know that that's what I was trying to accomplish with it. And so it created all this trouble with us. Andreas trying to be something else besides himself. And it just created a lot of trouble. And so I had to look at, like, was I going to let this standard be the beginning of the end of something? Or was I going to let go of the standard? Like, what did I actually value? Was it the rightness of the standard or something else? And that's kind of what I'm navigating all the time right now. Like, all these hard lines that I've drawn that you can't go beyond, and it's just this way. And that only leave two choices. It's like, really, if this is the hard line, it's like, if that's a deal breaker, then it does, like, something has to break. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, it seems like, I guess that's a little bit of a diversion from like going into the why, but.
Well, I mean, to me, I'm kind of wrapping it all up with the judgment, right? If we're not seeking the why, if there's no judgment around it, because when I was talking to my membership, and a lot of them have been in it almost a year now, and are really kind of starting to get the judgment piece at a different level. Someone had asked, well, what about like major morality things?
That morality, exactly.
Right? Because she was looking at, I'm kind of maybe wanting to be vegan now because now I'm aware of all the abuse that happens to animals and whatnot. And So what do you say to folks that bring you that when it gets to that level? Like, well, so you're saying death is okay, or that you can just run rampant and kill people? Like, what are we saying by when we say gain out judgment?
Well, I think what we're looking at is an overarching point of view that if you gave, so whoever you is, if the overarching hierarchy of society gave everybody total freedom, that we would run around stabbing each other. The underlying point of view in morality is that with freedom comes destruction.
Mm-hmm.
So in order to avert destruction, it's not even in order to live. The whole thing is based around aversion of destruction.
Yeah.
We have to put these rules in place so that people don't willy-nilly walk around. If we just gave everybody freedom, they just walk around poking each other's eyes out, essentially, right? So we have this underlying point of view that we're all sinners, that we're all at the very bottom of us, incredibly flawed and wrong and evil. And based on that point of view, we've created control. So I think what really has to be looked at the base of everything is like, and I am right now looking at this for myself in so many ways I didn't even know I was affected by it. Am I at the base of myself evil and wrong? Because that's what I have been believing. You can only continue to prove that you're right if you believe that you're wrong. And so my bottom line core judgment of myself is that I am incredibly, like, wrong is probably, there's probably not even a word for it that doesn't quite match the energy. Like, I'm incredibly flawed, I'm incredibly evil, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to hide that and prove that I'm not that while believing it. And so out of that comes all this difficulty. So the morality thing is like, you really have to look at, number one, where did that come from? Like, are we inherently evil? Is that actually true? Or is that something we bought? And if we actually gave ourselves freedom, what is the world we would create that we've never even looked at? Is it a worse world? Would we actually go around and comment negative things on other people's social media? There's so many of us I know that would be like, I would just stop watching that person. If they were just not that interesting to me anymore, I would just stop. Like, I wouldn't take the time to like bash them over the head with a comment, you know?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of us, to me, it's like some of the kindest, gentlest, most generous people are like using morality because somewhere they bought that they're evil. But when in truth, if we would give ourselves the freedom, we would create a kinder, gentler world.
Yeah. And I was kind of imagining as you were talking, just people coming together more. If, like, let's say all the rules were gone and yada yada, and like police were gone, whatever, the people coming together more to protect each other, almost instant. Because yes, you're still going to have some people that will choose destructive things. And I wonder if ultimately it'd be less because the people would be stronger and empowered themselves.
The people that want to live in a world that takes care of each other would rise up. Yeah. Because that would no longer be okay. Yeah. Not on my watch. You treat people that way. And that's the thing I think rules rob us of, is the innate, I want to say goodness. I don't know if there's another word for it, but the innate being that we are, which is, I mean, if I could create the world that I want to live in, like, we just wouldn't treat each other. Don't do that. Stop that. Not because there's a rule, not because it's wrong, but because that is not the world that on my watch we're going to live in.
Yeah. Or that creates greater.
Yeah. Well, I just don't want to live in that world. Like, I mean, for me, it doesn't even go to greater. It's just like,
interesting. Yeah.
No. Why? Because
it's kind of how like dogs function in packs, right? It's like there is just like, no, but it's calm. It's
it's just like that. It doesn't have a why. It's just that's not how we're doing it here.
Yeah, because there's no judgment.
Just it's exactly like that. Yeah.
Cats, on the other hand, I kind of think they're like
judgy
little pricks, but that's okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at, I think when you can kind of look at like when a natural disaster hits, what kind of rises up out of that are the people that care, that take care of each other, you know, and the nasty people just aren't even in the picture anymore, you know. So I just wonder, like, what would it take for us to give ourselves the freedom to be ourselves, trusting that something great is likely going to emerge. We're probably not going to destroy people. If we destroy anything, it's going to be limitation. And what else is possible?
I love it. I love it. What do we call this? Who knows?
Who knows? Thank you guys for tuning in.
Bye, y'all.